Thank you. This is my second opportunity to speak to this audience at Heritage, and as you all know, I represent a country which was far less fortunate than United Kingdom and Belgium after the World War II, because we fell behind the Iron Curtain and we have restored our democracy and independence and sovereignty only 22 years ago. And 20 years ago, almost all of us in Central and Eastern Europe have been dreaming about joining the EU, or what was then European Communities, as the role model of a free world. After 20 years, situation has changed substantially. EU is facing a political crisis. This is not primarily fiscal or financial crisis. This is a political crisis. This is crisis of one particular model of European integration invented after World War II that dominated Europe over last 55 years. And the economic crisis or fiscal crisis or crisis of the single currency is just one symptom of that disease or that decline. Now, you will never hear this from current European political leaders. They grew up within this EU model, within this political culture. They invested all of their political capital of a lifetime to continue that, and it became literally part of their political genotype. So they simply cannot admit that something went wrong, and moreover that something went wrong probably at the very beginning, because that would mean the biggest political defeat for them. But now it seems that there is a window of opportunity opening for alternative, for some other thoughts about the whole concept of the European Union. That's what we are trying to bring to public attention. Let me make 3 points. One about the misconception of so-called European federalism, the other one about EU-US relations, and the third one about possible future of the European Union. The first point, the difference between what is understood by federalism in US and in Europe should be, in my feeling, explained more thoroughly, because US, particularly US center-right, or people attached more to Republican Party, communicate very frequently with their European counterparts from what is called European center-right, the EPP, which has been mentioned by Geoffrey van Orden. And this body is dominated by continental Christian democratic parties that promote so-called EU federalism. But this federalism is very far from what we can understand in the United States by federalism. It's very far from some Jeffersonian federal lines with a small government, strong local authorities, strong private sphere, limited welfare system, certain distrust to any social engineering project, but also the common public opinion without which any representative government cannot exist. None of these things are fulfilled in the case of the European Union. It goes completely the opposite way. EU federalism, or what is understood in Europe by federalism, is in fact a continual transfer of powers upwards from nation states to central institutions in an attempt to create centralized, unitary, state-like entity which would be based on 3 pillars. One is redistributive economy, according Keynes, leading to a very extensive welfare system and extensive public expenditure. The other is strong supranational institutions like European Commission, European Parliament. But the third one, the third element, paradoxically, is also strong projection of national interests of some strong or big EU players via EU institutions and via EU decision-making procedures to the whole European integration process. So if some people still think that Europe could be remodeled according to US model, I say no, they can't, and it's wrong. Europe is different. Federalism can deliver a model of limited democratic government within a nation, but it cannot do so within an association of distinct and diverse 27 nations. And that's why we are opposing that idea of European federalism. My second point comes to a certain misunderstanding of European integration process amongst US political elites. The simplest and also the most simple-minded reflection of European integration from US side and from the State Department in particular is that the more united Europe is, whatever it means, the better for United States. There is a very popular mythology about federal or united Europe that such a Europe will actually reduce the burden of global leadership on the United States, and it will serve as a complementary force to US, not as a contradictory force. Now, let me tell you that in my feeling and in my observation, the purpose behind the EU's drive for a separate political or defense identity, this is primarily focused on restraining American action on the world stage, because there is still a lot of hidden anti-American agenda and atmosphere in Brussels and in European institutions. Let me quote one very famous MEP, our colleague from Germany, Mr. Elmar Brok. Some of you might know him because he's a very outspoken proponent of European federalism. He is a German MEP from the CDU party of Mrs. Merkel, and he's also, paradoxically, the chairman of the EP delegation for relations with the United States. He said in the Daily Die Welt on the 16th January of 2012, this year, that United States has launched an economic war against Europe. And he underpinned this argument by the following. No surprise, probably. The US rating agencies, he said, had no conceivable reason to downgrade 9 Eurozone states, which happened in the middle of January this year. And he said what this is really about is a political project aimed at advancing Anglo-Saxon interests in Europe. And he also somehow implicated that Americans have been becoming increasingly anti-European. You might consider this to be funny or paradoxical, but this is not. And I think that US political elites should stop their adherence to the idea of a European superstate and the holy grail of ever closer union within the EU. Third point is about the possible future of Europe. Are there any perspectives for some other version of European integration at all? Looser, more flexible, multi-speed, less supranational, more intergovernmental. Is there any window of opportunity for that? Well, what we see now is that there is a growing and widening opinion gap between EU political elites and leaders and the public opinion. If people are allowed to have their say on some particular plans, they usually say no. They said that in France and in Netherlands and in Ireland on various EU treaties, and still more frequently, as has been pointed out, Eurocritical movements or Eurocritical parties are able to gain ground in national elections, for instance in Netherlands, in Finland. Very recently, I have read a survey made by German Institute Allensbach, which was published by the newspaper Frankfurter Allgemeine Sonntagszeitung, and it said that some 71% of Germans have either little or low or no confidence in the euro. That's a very sharp contrast to, for instance, some statements of Mrs. Merkel, who stated several times that euro is worth to be saved for almost every price. So my feeling is that the EU political establishment will continue this old pathway of ever closer union, By the way, the fiscal treaty is only one last step in this direction, while this will result into a counter-reaction from public opinion or creation some opposing political forces. And now the question is what kind of these political opponents will be. Imagine that once German taxpayers are fed up by financing others, for instance Greece, just for the sake of euro, they will start to articulate this consent in political terms, and of course this demand will also create supply on the political scene. If that happens, probably we might see a sea change in German political landscape and almost a U-turn on EU integration, and that is not necessarily for good, taking into account our historic experiences. So I would rather see gradual departure from EU federalism, evolutionary, not revolutionary. However, EU establishment is not ready to make any concessions to allow something like multi-speed EU of Rye geometry. It's not ready to repatriate some powers back to nation states, and that's bad. That's what really concerns me, and that's why one of the probably the strongest reasons why we have been for years striving to create some alternative political platform that might articulate these opinions within Europe, but also deliver this message overseas across the ocean to its US allies. If I may dare to give some advices to the United States how it should deal with the EU at the moment, my feeling is that it definitely should not be one-sided. It should recognize once again that history of Europe is history of integrations and disintegrations as well. By the way, my own country has been in centuries part of few European supranational complexes, all of which eventually collapsed. So this is a good practical example that EU is not an ultimate end of Europe's development. So my feeling is that US should act very practically and very pragmatically as well. In a foreseeable future, unfortunately, I think we'll be witnessing unpredictability, uncertainty, poor economic performance, and also poor political leadership coming from Europe. And this is another reason why some democratic alternative vision of European integration should be delivered and should be constructed in a due time. And that's why we are also here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jan. I would now like